Hey, how's it going, everyone? This weekend, we're going to branch away from the Premier League and the football this weekend. And we're going to talk about hot takes, some of the biggest questions in the world of football, the Super League, the Champions League, basically all the big news in London. And this week, Daniel couldn't be here, so I brought in my cousin Carson, who's a huge Chelsea supporter. We'll be jumping right into the action right after this. Well, you're here instead of Daniel. Can you make up for his place? We'll see. But we're going to jump right into London, and we're going to start with West Ham. I've seen some topics about David Moyes, and he's brought West Ham all the way to fifth place. It was an interesting game against your club, Chelsea. Do you think David Moyes is criminally underrated this year? I've seen a lot of talk about that. What do you think?
I've always thought that. I mean, I'm sure it was hard to see at the time, but I always thought that United should have given him more time. He definitely doesn't play the most attractive brand of football. I mean, everyone will look back at the thousands of crosses that you guys put into the box under him.
Yeah.
But, I mean, if there was ever any proof that people needed that he's a quality manager, just look no farther than this season, right?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Like, I remember the game against Fulham we played there. I think we broke our crossing record. I think it was 76 or something that game. You probably remember that.
Yeah, it was a little over the top for sure.
Oh, that got annoying, and no one wanted to see that brand of football. But I agree with you. We should have kept him. Sir Alex backed him, and I think you gotta give some backing to Sir Alex, and to only give him a year, as we've given Ole too many. I think we've given him quite a while, and Jose quite a while, and Jose played a bland brand of football. You saw it at the bridge with Jose. We'll talk about Jose more in the show, but with David Moyes, you think he's got to bring in some more quality name players? You think they'll break into the top four?
Well, obviously, I kind of hope they don't, because I think if they do, it'll be at the expense of us or Leicester. But
yeah,
they definitely can. I think they definitely have a good squad of players. Obviously, Declan Rice. Obviously, other players as well. I haven't watched them too much this season, but I do look at their results and make sure that they're losing so that we can make the top four.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned Declan Rice there. Do you think he's been a bit overhyped this year? I know last year I wasn't the biggest fan of him, but I'm quite on the Declan Rice ship now. Are you a fan of his, or what do you think?
I mean, I think he's definitely a quality player, good young English player. Like I said, I haven't watched West Ham enough to have like an in-depth knowledge on how he plays, but I definitely don't think he's too overhyped. There's definitely a history of overhyped young English players, and if he makes that big move, I guess we'll see.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, last year and a year before, I thought Declan Rice was quite overhyped. All this 100 million talk from David Moyes we saw earlier in the year. Do you think 100 million was over the top? We talked about it before. What do you think?
That reminds me when Jose said 100 million for each leg for Hazard. But obviously that is a little over the top. But I definitely think he could fetch about 50 million.
Yeah, if you went, where do you think he'd go? Chelsea was a big talking point.
Obviously us, but I think that ship has kind of sailed once we let our last manager go, and I don't think the club really wants to break the bank for a player like that. So I think there's definitely other moves available for him in England, but it all comes down to which club wants to spend that money, right?
Yeah, for sure, and I could see the Glazers making a splash here, especially after the owners pissed off all the United fans, and I think they got to make it out to us somehow, because they want to win over the fans, and if not, they're going to have to leave, and it's either going to be a Haaland or a Declan Rice signing, I think. Do you think he would fit in well to Manchester United? I know you probably haven't watched us too much, but what do you think about that?
I think he could definitely fit in, and the Glazers definitely have some making up to do. Obviously, they usually do that with a big-name signing, but I think there's definitely a place for him in your midfield. He could definitely fulfill like a Scott McTominay kind of role, unless I'm wrong there, or kind of a Fred role maybe.
Yeah, for sure. We obviously need that defensive midfielder role, because right now he's playing McTominay and Fred, as you usually see when you play us, and then just to protect Maguire and Lindelof, because they're so freaking slow at the back. Because you need what was that?
I said Matic isn't getting any younger.
No, Matic is only getting older at this point, as you can see. You guys had the last good years of him, I believe, at Chelsea. We got him at an okay point, or maybe a year out of him.
I'd say we sold him at a good time.
Yeah, for sure. He was what, 30-ish when you guys saw him? I can't remember how old he would have been.
I'd say the other end of 30.
Yeah, 31, 32, probably around there. I mean, I saw him when he was at Old Trafford. He was still quite good first season under Jose, but you could tell he still wasn't getting any. His legs were losing on him, and you could really see it this year too with how much Ollie's playing him. You can tell he's not up to fitness and playing week in, week out. And then Fred just doesn't cut it. His passing's atrocious. He gives a lot of energy and a lot of pride towards the badge. He runs around the field, but he just doesn't have the passing ability that Declan Rice has. And then McTominay is probably a better placement for Pogba if Pogba leaves. He's good going up the pitch, as we saw against Leeds when we beat them quite heavily there. I won't mention the score for Daniel when he watches it back, but yeah, I think you're right there. If we get Declan Rice to play by Pogba or Van de Beek or Bruno, it's going to be an unbelievable midfield, just like your guys'. I'm going to quickly move on to the challenge on the weekend here. Florian Balbuena on Ben Chilwell. A lot of talk about this. Do you think it was a red card? Do you think it was a yellow in between or no card?
Obviously, in the moment, I have to admit that I was pretty biased. But after some reflection and seeing it in real time and not slow motion a couple times, because the slow motion definitely leaves it with a sour taste in your mouth. But I don't know how you could give a red for that, man. Where's his leg supposed to go? Like when you slow it down, sure, it looks pretty bad. It looks like he's stamping on him. But if you've ever played football, you know that you got to put your leg somewhere, and when you watch it in real time, it looks impossible that his leg could have went somewhere else.
Yeah, for sure. Like I was talking to one of my coaches at soccer, and he's a huge West Ham supporter, and we were talking. He was on ref, and he was saying, "Well, where's Balbuena going to put his leg?" I was even saying to him, like, if you're Jesse Lingard, maybe Jesse could. He's a smaller guy; he could maybe move his leg somehow, but you still got to place it somewhere, right? What you said, and Balbuena obviously isn't the most limbo guy in the world. He's a tall tree, really. He's like 6'2", 6'3", Balbuena, and there was nowhere really for him to put his leg. I mean, it did look bad because when you send the ref to the VAR screen, you slow it down about 3-4 times, slow it down, and we all look at it, and yeah, it looks like a red at first, but everyone who plays football, like you said, knows that's like, where are you going to put your leg? Like, you have no other place.
Exactly. I think it's also the growing pains with VAR, because I'm sure these refs are under a lot of pressure. You know, they once he sees the slowed down version of what happened, he knows that everyone's going to go home and see it on Match of the Day, and there's going to be a certain amount of people that see him stamping on his leg, and no matter what else happened, they're going to call for a red, right? And the ref might be just scared of that pressure, and he sees what happens and gives the red.
Yeah, for sure. And we've talked about VAR quite a bit on this show. Me and Daniel have had our opinions. I know you've seen them quite a bit. I want to get your opinions on VAR because a lot of people are quite against it or quite for it. I want to hear what you have to say.
I definitely think it's good in the long run. I think we're going through a lot of growing pains right now. I mean, when you take a game like football and you take any big drastic rule changes, I think it's going to take 3 or 4 years to kind of perfect it. So we're definitely in the early stages now. And I definitely think it's more positive than negative. And I hope that in a decade, it'll probably be a lot more seamless.
Yeah, exactly. VAR, just like in any other sport, if you put in a new system, it's always going to change things, and fans are always going to get livid. And it's always hard for refs to get it bang on too. In MLS, they're starting to get used to it, and even in Serie A, I see Serie A does a really good job of it. And if the Premier League can start to move into that, it would be fantastic. As long as the decisions start to get more thorough and more consistent and quicker, and then I think the fans will probably be happier with it, I would think.
Well, at the end of the day, whether you're using VAR or not, these refs are human beings, and they're going to make some terrible calls at the end of the day. And whether they use VAR or not, I think the terrible calls can be minimized, and I think the net amount of bad calls at the end of the season will probably be less with VAR. But there's still these people, human beings in the VAR booth, still making these calls, so they're still going to make mistakes.
Yeah, for sure. Everyone makes mistakes in their life. Like, if you went back in history, you saw maybe the Olivier Giroud scorpion kick or the Henrik Mkhitaryan scorpion kick. Both those, I think, were both offside. Or the Henrik Mkhitaryan one was offside. If you go back and take that one away now, there would be crisis in the football world. Like, some of these goals that you have to go back and take away would be a joke. And who knows what would happen. I think the Maybe you'd have justice for Henry's handball against Ireland. I think it was a long time ago in the Nations games. But yeah, like you said, growing pains. We're gonna get through it. Let's just like some other rules that got put into play, like the drop ball, the goal kick, all those kinds of things take their time, like they would have back then. But I want to get your take on the relegation battle. Daniel's given his take. We'll get yours before we move on to our next segment here. Do you think it's going to end up the same, the bottom three? I know Brighton and Newcastle started to pick up some wins. We'll talk about Joe Willock later, but do you think those teams are safe and it's like going to be like that now?
Well, unfortunately, my take on relegation is going to be very boring because I think the three teams down there at the moment are going to probably stay there. Newcastle, I feel really sorry for all the Newcastle fans. I wouldn't want Steve Bruce as my manager, but I think they are safe, and I understand why Mike Ashley hired Steve Bruce. Unfortunately, like I said, it sucks for the Newcastle fans. They don't want to play that kind of football, but he's doing his job at the end of the day, and unfortunately, he doesn't work for the fans. He works for Mike Ashley, and he's delivering his mandate, and he's keeping them safe.
Yeah, I've backed Fulham quite a bit, and you've probably seen that. And now I have to kind of pull that back. I've always been a Newcastle supporter, but I'm a big fan of Scott Parker and what he's done for Fulham. But he just doesn't have the quality there with Fulham. He can't bust into that out of relegation battle like the likes of Brighton and Newcastle have. They have the better quality of players, which is quite obvious at this point. I think if you gave Scott Parker that Newcastle team, it'd be much higher up the table. What was that?
Definitely.
Yeah, for sure. I think he's much better attacking manager, and even saw Pep Guardiola crediting him from passing it all back even when they're losing at City, which I think is due credit to him. When you're getting praised by Pep, you know you're doing something right.
That's the seal of approval for sure.
Yeah, for sure. You just need to get Jose's now. But before we go to commercial, I want to hear what you have to say about this. I've said Frank Lampard. A lot of people talk about Roy Keane going to Celtic or Frank. I've said Frank needs to stay in the Premier League and not go into a weaker league. And I thought he should go to a big team that needs resurrection. What do you think about Newcastle? Do you think he could resurrect Newcastle?
Well, I mean, resurrect would be probably a stretch because what are you talking about when you say resurrect, right? I definitely don't think he could help them challenge for the league or finish top four or anything, but he's definitely a quality enough manager to maybe break into the top 10 with a team like that. But the question is, would he want to go to Newcastle, and would Newcastle hire a manager like that?
Yeah, that is a big question because he did ask for quite a bit of money at Chelsea, and if he did that at Newcastle, I don't think he'd be getting that from Mike Ashley.
Well, I think that would be unrealistic to expect from Newcastle for sure, that kind of money.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think he has the right players already to fit his system. St. Maximin, Joe Willock, if Joe Willock stays, the likes of Callum Wilson. I think he'd fit perfect for Frank Lampard's system. I'm not sure if you think those players are perfect for him. What do you think about those guys?
Well, he definitely focuses on attacking football. So for a manager like him to take over a team near the bottom would definitely be a challenge for him because I don't think when he managed us, I don't think he focused on much of the defending in his tactics or training. I think that was definitely left up to the other members of the coaching staff. So it would definitely be interesting to see if he took over a smaller team near the bottom to see how a manager like that could cope with a relegation battle would definitely be interesting.
Yeah, I think it'd be like a Marcelo Bielsa kind of style. I don't care how many we let in, we just got to score.
Definitely.
Because as you said, you guys leaked goals under Frank. I always knew he'd score against you when we played you. Like that's why he brought in likes of Thiago Silva, Ben Chilwell, and then he brought up Reece James from when he was off injury to just hope that Thiago Silva could consolidate the back line. But it didn't work for him in the end, sadly. Hopefully he can get his job soon. I'd like to see Frank back because I think he's got it. I know a lot of people criticized him heavily. Before we go to commercial here, what do you think? Do you think Frank has what it takes as a Chelsea supporter?
Well, when you say has what it takes, I definitely think he has what it takes to make it as a manager, whether that's at the absolute top of the game, managing one of these super clubs, you could say. That I'm not as sure about, but he's definitely a good manager. And to do as well as he did with us in his second job so early in his career to get top 4 in a season where we did have a transfer ban. I know that's every Chelsea fan's excuse to say that he did a good job, but it is sort of an achievement. And it's definitely rebuilding time for him. And I definitely don't think his career is over.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree with you. It was tough. I agree. I think it is a huge achievement. I have heard a lot of people criticize because that you guys technically did sign Kovacic and Pulisic, but that is stretching it a bit. But he did bring in a lot of youth: Mason Mount, Tomori, Tammy Abraham, which have all turned out to be fantastic players. Tomori and AC Milan now. Tammy Abraham, just talking him going to Leicester. And then Mason Mount's probably, for me, one of the players of the season in the entire Premier League, let alone your own club. But we're going to move on to a different team who needs rebuilding right after the break right here. Well, you said Frank Lampard could look to rebuild. I'm going to look to a team that definitely needs a rebuild, a retool, or however the heck you want to say it. Tottenham Hotspur. I'm just going to let you roll with your opinion, give a rant here. I know you hate Tottenham. Just give your opinion on what you thought of Ryan Mason, Jose Mourinho, and your thoughts on the club right now.
Well, it's kind of required of me to hate Tottenham, I guess you could say. But when Jose was there, I'd hate to admit that I did have a soft spot for them, and I was kind of rooting for them. I wanted Jose to prove everybody wrong, and it's a shame that he didn't get that chance in the League Cup final because of him getting the sack. I didn't even bother to watch the game because I knew what the result would be. And it's a shame he didn't get to see out the one game that probably mattered the most in that whole job. It'll be interesting to see where Tottenham goes from here, but Ryan Mason is probably not the man for the long term. But it's hard to say if Tottenham can even attract a manager in the same caliber of Jose. And it's definitely interesting to see that this is his first job without a trophy. Yeah, I guess it lends to the fact that maybe he is going on a downturn, as much as it pains me to say. But yeah.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people say he's on a downturn. He definitely is on a bit of a downturn. I don't think he'll be back in the Premier League, I'd have to say, because I don't think a club definitely would go back for him after seeing what he did at United and did at Tottenham to the fans. But you can say he's on a downturn. Yes, he played dire football at United. I hated what we played, but he still is our most winning manager after Sir Alex left. Yes, you can say Ollie played better football, but Jose still did win us a Europa League. He won us an FA Cup. He won us a League Cup, and he won us the Community Shield. I'll even throw that in there for Jose because he called that the treble, but it wasn't the treble. But he still did win some good trophies for us. We won quite a bit, and it still was fun to see us winning trophies, which I haven't seen that in a while. Nowadays, we only lose semifinals. And even at Tottenham, I don't know if I still believe. I even texted you, I think, 2 days before he got sacked, saying I think he's gonna win the trophy, or City are gonna lose one of them, or they're not gonna win the quadruple or whatever. And then Jose goes and gets sacked a day or two later after I told you that, and I couldn't believe it because Jose was hired to win them a trophy. That's Spurs didn't care if they played dire football. That's why Daniel Levy hired him. And why are you sacking Mauricio Pochettino if you're going to hire Jose Mourinho and you're just doing it for a trophy? I just couldn't understand why they fired him before the league. Do you think he should have been fired after the League Cup or before the League Cup?
Well, obviously after, because if anything would have given him a chance, it would have been that, because they were out of the Europa League. They barely have a chance for top 4, I want to say.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, Jose is judged on trophies. So it's for him to not win a trophy in this job. I mean, like you said, it was nice to see him win for United. And yeah,
where do you see him going after this?
Oh, where do I? I've always thought it would be nice to see him go to the Portugal job or a national team, or even it's probably a good time for a sabbatical for him. he's been in the trenches at big super clubs for such a long time. It's probably about time for Jose to take a break, I'd say.
But you saw interviewers there piling after him when he was leaving his London house or his London wherever he was living there, and he said Jose doesn't take a break, which was quite funny. But do you believe him here, or do you think he's just playing up to the cameras like he always does?
Well, Jose is always about a narrative, like you said when he won the Community Shield and he wanted to pass it up for a treble. Deep down, Jose knows that's not a treble, but I think he feels that in order to stay in the game at the very top level, he has to spin whatever narrative he can to make himself come out on top, which is what he's always done.
Could you see him going to the German league? Because we've seen him in Spain, we've seen him in Italy and England a couple times. What do you think about Germany or France?
I'd love to see him in Germany or France just to kind of complete his career off, but I can't see Jose eating his words like that. He's always talked down on, especially the Bundesliga, about how it's kind of a procession of a league, how it's a two-team league, or you could even make an argument for it being a one-team league in the past decade. So I can't see Jose ever going back on his word like that.
Yeah, I hate to agree with you because I'd like to see him take over that door. It would have been awesome to see him take over the Bayern job. I personally would have liked to see him take that job. He wouldn't have played the most entertaining football, but with Jose taking over number 9 like Robert Lewandowski, I think he would have doubled the amount of goals Lewandowski would have scored. Somehow, I hate to say it, but I think he would have with his defensive style football and seeing what Kane did at Tottenham. We never thought Kane would become what he did here. He turned into the best playmaker and the best goal scorer, I think, in the Premier League. He put Kevin De Bruyne to shame. Like I think I saw a stat once he got fired. It was 63 goal contributions in 63 games under Jose, which is really telling because a lot of people say he doesn't score goals, but we saw him in that interview talking about Drogba, Benzema, Ronaldo. Do you think Jose really does get the best out of number 9s, or is it all just a facade that he doesn't score goals?
Well, his teams always do score a lot of goals when he does play counter-attacking football. And even when he does play turgid football at clubs, there's always a period when the football is insanely beautiful to watch. Maybe not even beautiful, but just exciting to watch. I remember even in the last time he won the title for us, 2014-15 season when we had Fabregas and Costa, that was some of the most exciting football I've seen. It was goals upon goals. I remember when we played Everton, and I think it was 5-4. And then he'll have a period where he plays a lot of attacking, entertaining football, and then he kind of puts the lock and key on it and sets up shop for the rest of the season. So there's usually a method behind his madness, and at the end of the day, he is all about winning. So if that's what your football is about, you're going to love Jose.
Yeah, exactly. At the end of the day, football fans just want to win. We all crave to win. No one wants to lose. And Jose is a unbelievable winner. We've always seen it. We all know it. And I think he still has it in his locker. And I know he's going to have it wherever he goes next. And hopefully it's Portugal because I'd love to see him manage Ronaldo again. But before we move on from Tottenham, Harry Kane and Heung-min Son are two huge questions in that team. We saw Son break down and cry. It could be just because they lost the final, but maybe he knows he's leaving. And then Harry Kane's been talked about for weeks. Where do you think these two will go, or will they go?
I think if Harry Kane does want to be that next caliber of player, I think he does need to move on from Tottenham because, as we've seen this season, Tottenham aren't going to win anything. Because when you have Jose Mourinho and you don't win anything, then it's probably going to be hard for you to win anything after Jose leaves as well. There's a lot of talk about Harry Kane going to Man City, which would be definitely hard to see because I think that would be another step towards City dominating the league. But I can't really see Son leaving. He seems very at home in Tottenham, and he doesn't seem quite as ambitious as Kane. He seems a little more content in his career. But Kane, I could definitely see moving on to something bigger.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Son always looks like he's happy at Tottenham and like he's there to stay. And I think they got to build around him. like at other clubs where you build around Bruno, you build around Mason Mount per se for you guys. And I think Kane's got to go to the likes of Real Madrid, even PSG. I could see him going there if Mbappe leaves, him and Pochettino linking back up. Man City, I could see it, but I just feel like they don't splash the money on a big name player like they do on that. They'll go for 50, 60 million like a Danny Ings or a Lautaro Martinez, but I don't think they'd go for 150, 100, wherever you want to price Harry Kane, because you never know how much they're going to want for him. Daniel Levy's always going to ask for a hefty fee. And then Son, I've heard rumors, but I don't think he's going, like you said. Before we go to break in a couple minutes here, we're going to talk about your club here before we move on to the European Super League that happened this past week. Thomas Tuchel, what do you think about his appointment, and did you expect this from the hiring of him?
Well, I knew he was a quality manager. I was a little bit worried about the way he falls out with clubs. You've heard, I'm sure you've heard a lot coming out of the Dortmund camp about how he was difficult to deal with. Same with PSG. But I do think the hierarchy at PSG is hard to get along with, just how they are in the first place. And he's quite surprised me in how diplomatic he is and how easy he is to deal with. And I think he's probably learned a lot from the fallout at PSG, because if he seems like a very smart guy, and smart people learn from bad experiences like that. And I don't think he would repeat mistakes like that. So our board has always proved that if you work with them and you're not a complete psychopath like Antonio Conte was, that you'll probably keep the job as long as the results keep coming in. Whether that lasts for 2 years or 5 years or 1 year, that's probably up to you. And he's done a good job so far, obviously getting us into one final so far and hopefully another. But I think it's hard to judge the football we've been playing as what we'll be playing long term. I think a lot of the players that we have at the club will be offloaded in the summer, so long as the market allows for it. So I think he is playing a brand of football that is kind of getting us to the end of the season with the best results that he can. And maybe next season, with a different squad of players, I think he'll play a slightly different brand of football than we've been playing this year for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned departures there. Who would you like to see, and who do you think are going to leave?
Well, I think we have a really good quality deep squad as it is. So it's hard for me to say who I'd like to see. But I definitely think Jorginho will probably be off to Italy. Unfortunately, I think Tammy Abraham will be off. I think it's very unfortunate, being the club's top scorer for 2 seasons in a row. Yeah. He probably feels very disrespected, and I don't blame him. So I think a good move to Aston Villa or maybe Leicester, something like that, would be in the cards for him. But besides that, I just think the players that Tuchel will find that fit most well in the system that he wants to play next season will probably be the best to keep around.
Yeah, he has done a tremendous job so far, as you say. And I think he is playing just a brand of football, as you say, that'll get him over the line this year, keep him the job, not really throw him under the bus too much. And he's using the players that know will get him there instead of the players I think he wants to get him there or in the future.
Exactly.
And I think Tammy Abraham to Leicester would be an unbelievable signing for Leicester. I know I've had some hard thoughts on him, as you've probably known throughout the years. But I think Tammy Abraham is quality. He has shown us that now. And I really back him now. I used to not like him at all. And I think if you put Tammy Abraham up there with Jamie Vardy and Kelechi Iheanacho, who's on fire now, you're going to have one of the best attacks in the league probably from Leicester. And under a guy like Brendan Rodgers, you know your number 9 is going to score goals. And with 3 unbelievable 9s, Brendan Rodgers can have goals at his fingertips, which is unbelievable for him. And I want to get your opinion on Mason Mount here. What do you think about him? Because I think he could be the player of the season in the Premier League.
Oh, future club captain for sure, and definitely our player of the season. Definitely. I mean, the goal against Liverpool, and I think it was the 1-0 game we won in Anfield. I think it was the best example of how he takes the game to the scruff of the neck and really puts his all in for the club. there was a time that I thought that we had so many quality players, but none of them really took any leadership or any drive in the game. In the same way that the group of players, i.e. Drogba, Cech, Terry, Lampard, Cole, we had a really good group of players that really showed the leadership on the pitch. And I think we lacked that group for a long time. And now Mason's definitely one of the few players that shows that in our team.
Yeah, Mason for me is really a bright spot in England's future. I think he's going to be a Chelsea club captain, and I think he's going to be an England captain too. Either him or Declan Rice, because you're going to see both of them in the midfield in the future. But I never thought he would have been this good. I knew he was a great player at Derby when Frank had him there. Frank's son, obviously, and I thought he was going to go on to be a good player. I didn't think he would be fantastic or incredible like he is. As a Manchester United fan, I would say Bruno's been unbelievable and one of the best players in the league. But I think the stuff Mason Mount does off the ball, not just on the ball for you guys, and just seeing him play week in, week out when I've watched you guys, he's been unbelievable, and you can't deny it. He scores goals. He sets up plays. He comes back and helps. Like he's your all-in-all midfielder. He reminds me exactly of Frank Lampard, and it's great to see. And like you say, he's going to be – what was that?
Well, Tuchel's appointment has actually done him wonders, I'd say, because it was definitely maddening to my ears to hear everyone chalk on about Frank's son, and it really discounted how well he was playing under Frank. And now people see that he's not only Frank's son, he's Tuchel's son, he's whatever manager he plays under's son. He's Southgate's son, he's the future England manager's son, he's the future Chelsea manager's son. Any manager would be lucky to have him.
Yeah, exactly. I think he's, like I said, for me, he's the Premier League player of the season, but I obviously know he's not going to get it. He's going to be your guys' player of the season, but I would say he's been Premier League player of the season. Obviously, he's not going to get it. It's either going to be Jack Grealish, Bruno, or Kevin De Bruyne, or Harry Kane, one of those guys. But I think Mason deserves more credit than he is getting in the league right now because he's been absolutely fantastic, like we've said. We're going to move on to the big talking point of the past week, the Super League, right after this. Well, the big talking point from the past week has been the European Super League. It wasn't really called the European Super League. That's what everyone's been calling it because all the teams are from the European leagues, per se. But it really is called the Super League. And I want to just get your general thoughts on the league before we really jump in deeper into the conversation. What do you think about the Super League?
Well, I'm ashamed to say I've done a 180 on the whole issue. I'm sure I told you my opinion before it actually happened. I've always thought that this whole idea of a Super League is inevitable. Part of me still thinks it's inevitable. I mean, with the new Champions League changes, you could argue that we already have a Super League. But it's definitely shown the true colors of a lot of these clubs. And like I said, I've done a 180. Especially after all the protests at Stamford Bridge. And it's nice to take pride in our fans being the fans that really started all the protests and showing that the power in the game still does lie with the fans, thankfully. Because no matter how much money these clubs make from the football they play or the merchandise they sell, these clubs were there before the executives and owners, and these clubs will be here long after these executives and owners. And it really shows a huge disrespect to the fans for them to even plan all this. But it's been a good case study to show that the power does still lie with the fans, thankfully.
Yeah, for sure. And before we dive even deeper, I just want to tell people exactly what the Super League was. It was 12 teams coming together, two presidents exactly of Joel Glazer and Florentino Perez from Real Madrid and Manchester United. And the 12 teams were 6 from England, the top 6, Tottenham, Arsenal, Chelsea, Manchester United, Manchester City, and Liverpool. You had the 3 clubs in Italy, Juventus, and the 2 Milan teams, and then Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid, and Barcelona. And they all wanted to make a Super League where they can play in their respective leagues and play midweek. They wouldn't be in the Champions League anymore. But then FIFA stepped in and they said the players wouldn't be allowed to play in national tournaments like the World Cup, Euros, and they wouldn't be allowed in the Premier League or your respective nations tournaments. And it really changed things, and fans really lost it. As you can see, Carson wasn't a big fan of it, and I wasn't really a fan of it either. I'll give more of my opinion after. But do you think it's good to see fans protesting outside stadiums even during COVID times, or do you think it's good to see unity and stability between the fans right now?
Of course, it's good to see football fans unite to a single cause, especially in such a divisive world these days, because it definitely left a sour taste in my mouth kind of to introduce this divisive issue. You could also almost say divisive politics into football, because I don't think it has any place in football. But let's not get it mixed up here. UEFA and FIFA, they're not saints either. And I've always thought that if we do a Super League, or if football changes, both parties are being so stubborn that if things do change, I don't think things will change for the better. So there's got to be a certain amount of open dialogue for football to change, because I don't think UEFA is always looking for the best interests of football either. Seferin, the president of UEFA, said he didn't know how many snakes were around him. Well, I'm sure he's probably a snake himself. It's a room full of snakes, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just crazy to even think that you could have a Super League without teams like Ajax or Porto. So if we're gonna do a Super League, do it the proper way. And if we're gonna do football, let's do it the proper way.
Yeah, for sure. And we had Florentino Perez come out in an interview. I think it was a couple hours after he announced this, or they all announced this, and Perez was saying we have the fans in mind. It's the best interest for the fans and the best interest for the game, which I couldn't believe, because if he would have actually went on social media, he would have seen that the fans didn't have this in mind, wasn't in their best interest. Because we even saw people, YouTube and American streamers saying, "What the heck's up with Twitter right now? It's blowing up with football and all this European stuff." And nobody knew what was happening besides football fans. It was unbelievable. And to see even in Canada, let alone in Europe, we're seeing even on CTV News, CBC, they're talking about the European Super League and the crisis happening in Europe. And to think it's getting that much stir and that much action. And we even saw Boris Johnson come in to try and stop it, which was crazy. What do you think about Boris and the government stepping in, really bring in politics? What did you think about that?
Oh, when Boris comes in, you know you got an issue. Well, I mean, it was good to see not just football, but the whole of society in a way unite for the better of football. Yeah, especially to hear Boris come out and say something, it was crazy.
Who would ever thought Boris would have saved football, right?
Oh, he's the unlikely savior sometimes, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And Gary Neville had quite a bit of comments on Sky Sports saying that it's killing the game. 112 years is gone. You're leaving the pyramid behind. Obviously, he owns Salford City, which I kind of support once in a while. Very good club. And he's kind of resurrected Salford. What do you make of his comments and Jamie Carragher's over the weekend? Because obviously Sky Sports are one of the big factors in this that funds the money for the Premier League and the Big Six to help them move away. And yes, Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher were giving their thoughts and destroying the Super League, but they're also acting like good guys and helping out Sky Sports. What do you think about this and Sky Sports and Gary Neville and Carragher?
Well, whenever anybody, whether it's Sky Sports or BT Sports, you always got to look at who's saying it and why they're saying it. And obviously Sky Sports has a big stake in the Premier League. And I'm sure, if the Super League happens, the Premier League becomes a second-rate competition, and all of a sudden, I'm sure the money dries up pretty fast. So I'm not surprised they're saying what they're saying, but at the same time, I'm knowing Carragher and Neville, I'm sure that is their actual opinion.
Yeah, those two never really lay back on their thoughts, I guess. And the history behind the clubs as Chelsea, Manchester United, we both have rich history. Same with Arsenal, Liverpool, Real Madrid, Barcelona. Do you believe that some fans are saying the history is gone, the history is brushed away because of the Super League? You're not in the Champions League, in the Premier League anymore, and you leave your history and your past behind you, or do you don't believe in that?
Well, it's definitely hard to say, and it's definitely person to person. It's what football means to you, because whether people like it or not, I mean, football is going to change. Whether it changes into a super league or it changes because of VAR, football is always going to change. And in 100 years, I think all these big clubs will still be there, whether it's in a super league or it's in a Premier League. The change is going to happen, and as fans, we just got to make sure that the change happens as responsibly as it can. And I hope they don't disrespect us anymore.
Yeah, the way these owners are, it's like they don't care about the fans. Obviously, they're showing that they don't, because the way they've treated the fans and the timing of them doing it is obviously atrocious and disgusting. Coming in doing it during COVID times, knowing they're not going to get protests against, no one's going to leave the stadium, no one's going to buy the tickets. It's just a great time for them to schedule it, but a terrible time against us because the fans, obviously it's our opinions, and as a lot of the players stepped out saying, like Liverpool's players, I can't remember if Chelsea players did, but I know Bruno Fernandes said something, Daniel Podence even, Ilkay Gundogan even came out, and some of the comments were great from some of the players, but it just shows the utter sheer disrespect that we get compared from the owners. Even the players get disrespected. The new Champions League tournament got written up, and I think there was 10 or 15 more games or something, and Ilkay Gundogan came out and said, we're thinking about the fans right now, but what about this new tournament with extra games? What do you think about the players in mind? And the new tournament had so many extra games. What do you think about that? And Gundogan saying, why don't you also think about the players as well as the fans?
Well, I mean, football is definitely reliant on both. I mean, football is nothing without the fans. Like we've definitely learned that through COVID. I don't know about you, but sometimes I put on a game and I question why I'm watching this training match. But at the same time, football is nothing without the players either. So we definitely have to take both parties into account. And I definitely haven't heard enough talk about how this new competition in the Champions League with 100 games is going to affect the players, because we've seen this season with the game congestion how the players' bodies have just been breaking down like old rusty machines. And are we just going to continue to let that happen, and players are just going to play hundreds of games a season for our benefit or for the executives' benefit? There's definitely got to be more consultation between all parties, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. A new tournament like this kind of, especially with Liverpool, you saw a definition of injuries come to Liverpool early on in the season. They just couldn't keep up with the games. Their bodies are giving out on them. It might have been Klopp's pressing style, but you even saw other teams like Aston Villa, per se, Leicester have taken a lot of injuries. United haven't had much, but other teams have had quite a bit of injuries. And to say you're going to add even more games for the Champions League clubs who might not even have much depth, it kind of kills the sport for the players too, because it loses their passion. Really, I don't know what you think about that, but
Well, it also goes in favor of all these super clubs, right? Because if we have this great congestion of games, at the end of the day, the only squads that are going to be able to cope with that are the insanely deep squads, like Chelsea, for example, or PSG, or Real Madrid. The Atalantas of this world won't be able to compete in the Champions League, I'm afraid.
yeah, like it just kills the sport, because the love of football is the weak beating the small, as Eric Cantona would say, or other people have said all the time throughout this week. And if you don't see that in the game, it kind of kills the love of the sport, and the passion behind it kind of goes. And before we wrap up today's episode, I want to talk about earlier today. You and me both saw the news. Julian Nagelsmann from Red Bull Leipzig, the manager from Red Bull, has left. He hasn't left them yet. At the end of the season, he will be leaving to join FC Bayern Munich, as their manager leaves them at the end of the year to join the German national team, more than likely. What do you think of this appointment of Julian Nagelsmann and the fee of $25 million for a manager?
Well, it's definitely a crazy fee, especially for Bayern Munich standards, because the only player I can think of that they paid that much money or more for is Leroy Sané. So, I mean, I hope it doesn't go the way of Niko Kovac, promising young coach. But there's no question that he is a good quality coach, and I'm sure he'll do well for Bayern. kind of standard, I guess.
Yeah, it's really an obvious appointment. A young, promising German in the league, and they're getting taken by Bayern Munich. Really, you expect at this point it's always going to happen. It's just not from Dortmund this time. It's from Red Bull Leipzig, and the fee of 25 million for a manager is kind of absurd. Did you ever expect a manager in football to go for this kind of price?
Well, I mean, the minute the market blew up to extraordinary and outrageous standards, it's kind of hard to surprise me with any transfer fee at this point. But it all comes down to how much they wanted the manager, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, it seems like they were taken aback by Hansi Flick's resignation. So I'm sure they had the pick of 95% of managers across Europe, and they wanted their guy, and they got their guy.
Yeah, for sure. And the fee of 25 million for a coach in football is kind of crazy, but we have other guys in the game getting paid oodles amount for managers. I think Diego Simeone at Athletic was getting, I think, around 15, 20 million too. You got the likes of Jose, who's picking up 20s of 40s a million wherever he leaves and gets fired. At this point, I'm thinking it's on purpose just so he can get his money almost, because Jose is kind of filthy rich at this point. He's rich, more rich than most of the players at this point, Jose.
I think he's more rich from being sacked than working in clubs at this point.
Yeah, exactly. He's getting money wherever he wants. Then his Instagram, he'll probably get a deal sometime with his Instagram eventually.
Well, I always thought Tottenham, whether they wanted to sack him or not, probably wouldn't have been able to afford it. But I guess they found the money somehow.
There we go. Yeah, and I think that's a perfect way to sum it up. Football, money, European Super League. I think that's the perfect ending to our show. What better way to end it than talking about money with football, because that seems like the only thing we talk about these days. But thanks, everyone, for tuning in this week, and thank you for tuning in last week. It's been a great couple of weeks, and we hope you guys enjoyed it with our new co-host, Carson, for this week, and maybe see more of him in the coming weeks, hopefully.
Dollars and euros and pounds, my friend.
Bye for